What's going up, everybody? It's Chini the Great, and I'm back for another video. So in this video, I thought I would challenge myself to do 24 watercolor paintings in one day. I've been watching Robin Sealark a lot on YouTube, and she's been doing these painting marathons where she'll challenge herself to paint as much as she can within a certain amount of time, or to paint for a certain amount of time continuously, or to paint a certain amount of paintings in a certain amount of time. And what she's doing when she's doing these little marathons is she's having to paint very quickly, and in doing that, it's freeing her up to be more expressive in her painting and to be less of a perfectionist. And I thought, since I'm new with watercolor, doing something like that would be a great way for me to get used to using watercolor. So that's what I did. I challenged myself to paint 24 watercolor paintings in one day. This took me about 13 hours of work to paint all these paintings, and that was pre-planning a little bit. So as you can see here, I'm using some blue painter's tape to create a border in my sketchbook, and I did some things like this to prepare ahead of time for my paintings. So I sketched out some concepts for these paintings. I made the borders ahead of time if I wanted a border. And every single painting that I did this day was pre-planned. All the ink drawings were pre-drawn before I began painting. And this was just so that I had an idea of where I wanted to go before I began painting. If I were to create all the concepts, do all the inking and sketching and preparation work, and try to paint all these in 24 hours, I don't think I could have done that. So I did pre-plan every single one of these paintings. I had a bunch of different styles and techniques that I used. You can see here I'm working on a couple different smaller landscapes. I did plenty of landscapes. I did some botanical paintings. I did some original illustrations. I did some fan art. I did some Bob's Burgers and Rick and Morty fan art. And I also did a little bit more abstract stuff. So you'll get to see all that in this video, and I do apologize, the video is sped up insanely fast because I had to get over 5.5 hours of footage down to 20 minutes. But so I can't really explain too much of my processes, but I did learn a lot while I was doing this challenge. I think the biggest thing I learned was color mixing. Now, I do have experience in art and painting, I just don't have much experience in watercolor itself, so I do have a strong understanding of color theory already, but because I've never worked in watercolor, or at least not much, I didn't ever really mix a lot of watercolors. But doing this challenge, I mixed plenty of colors. There was not many colors that I used straight out of the tube, and some things I mixed on the palette that you can see to the left of my hand, and other things I mixed directly onto the sketchbook if I wanted a more separated kind of blending style, if I wanted different colors to be visible, and then some things I mixed thoroughly on the palette and then put them onto the paper so it appeared to be more of a solid color. I definitely had tons of fun doing this, although I think by painting number 20 I was a little bit burnt out and I was ready to get it over with. I'm very, very happy with a lot of these paintings and not very happy with some other ones. A lot of the landscapes that I did, I do think turned out pretty well. The first two, the little cabin and the waterfall, the first two paintings, I think those were two of the best paintings in this whole series. Some things that I wasn't too happy with was actually some of the original illustrations didn't turn out quite like I wanted it to. But I don't hate any of my paintings that came out. Some of the abstract stuff didn't turn out exactly how I wanted it. You'll see later on, I tried to do some glazing and some washes and experiment with that. So what I did was lay out a lot of water on the paper and then drop some pigment down onto the paper. And the idea is that it acts as watercolor does, and it'll spread out and blend and turn into something beautiful. So I did that with a galaxy. I tried to make a galaxy, and I don't know if I just put way too much water on the paper, but everything blended together and just looked muddy and crappy. So what I actually did is took a paper towel and wiped as much of that off as I could, and all that was left was a stain on the paper, which I doodled over. And those are probably my least favorite paintings, but still, it was something to learn with, and I had a lot of fun just trying things out, and now I'll know for next time not to add so much water. What you see me painting here is a cloud landscape, and I think this one turned out alright. Um, Not as visible as I'd like it to be, so I tried another cloud painting later on, and it turned out even worse. It was just too soft and not quite, not as much contrast as I would have liked. But I have been, since these paintings, I've been looking up a little bit of tutorials online of how to do clouds in watercolor, because I can do clouds and oil painting very easy. Any beginner can do oil painting clouds very, very easily. It only takes a few seconds. Watercolor is a bit more difficult because all the colors are transparent for the most part, so you can't really paint on top of another color and expect it to be opaque. So you really have to have a concept ahead of time of where you want your clouds and the light source and all that. Whereas with oil or acrylic, you can just paint anything on and cover things up as you need to. So here is one of my, or two of the botanical paintings. I did some flowers. The one on the right is a rose, and the one here is a water lily. And I really don't like painting flowers, or I thought I didn't like painting flowers before I did this challenge. I've only tried painting flowers in, well, I tried 2 oil paintings. One I'm currently still working on, and the first oil painting flowers I ever did just turned out absolutely awful and really discouraged me from flower paintings. And I tried one watercolor one before, maybe like a month ago, and it turned out okay. I tried more glazing techniques, but I wasn't really super proud of it. It was okay. It wasn't horrible, but I'm much happier with the results in these botanical paintings. And I do 2 more flower paintings later on, and I'm even more pleased with those. So I actually think I really like painting flowers, at least in watercolor. I had a really fun time painting all the flowers and a lot of the landscapes here, which is funny because I'm not a landscape painter. I don't, the medium that I have the most familiarity with, I guess you could say, or the most experience with, is graphite drawings, and I do almost exclusively portraits in graphite. And when I moved on to charcoal in college, we did a lot of still lifes, so not any landscapes at all. And when I took a painting class, we did one landscape, and I didn't quite like how it turned out. And since then, I've done some practice landscapes, and I'm growing more fond of it. It's definitely something new to me. I don't think I would be good at drawing landscapes in graphite or charcoal, but in painting, it's something completely different, and I think I really, really like it. Right here, I'm trying some original illustrations, and again, on the one in the right, I tried to drop some water on the paper and then put some red pigment in there and let it bleed and spread out to look like blood splatters. But again, I think I just added way too much water, so I wiped all the ink off the page as much as I could, and I just tried to redo it. And it doesn't look as awful as the washes later on in the video turned out, but it definitely didn't have the same effect that I wanted it to. But these are some original illustrations, some political propaganda here. So I don't know. I think I'll keep toying with this idea, and I'll definitely practice doing those washes with a lot of water later on. I think one of my problems is the paper that I'm using. So in this watercolor sketchbook I made myself out of Strathmore 400 series 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. And I think it's awful. The front of the pages is okay if you're just blocking in flat color. If you want to do a lot of granulating techniques or techniques where watercolor is spreading and you're doing some wet on wet techniques, I don't think it's the right paper to use. And I also use the back of the pages in this sketchbook because if I used only the front, then the way I've bound the book, it would be very awkward. There would just be random random paintings on random pages because the fronts of the paper is sometimes on the back of the page, and the back of the paper is sometimes on the front of the page, so it would look weird if I only used the front, so I did also use the back, and it's definitely not meant for painting on. The color does not spread, and it gets really weird textures. Later on, I do some Rick and Morty fan art, and when I'm drawing Mr. Meeseeks, that's on the back of the paper, and it just was awful. I got this weird texture. It kind of created this like brush strokey effect, which is really strange in watercolor to have that at all, but it just did not let the color lay flat down. I was just putting in flat colors. I wasn't trying to blend or do any crazy techniques, and even then I got this weird texture and I was not happy with it. But for practice, I think I'm just going to go ahead and use up all this paper and then experiment with some different brands of watercolor paper. But for practice, I think this is fine. I just know for the future I'm not going to be purchasing this paper anymore. But yeah, right here I'm doing a lighthouse landscape. This is one of my favorite ones that came out in this little series here. I like how kind of muted the colors are. In this one, a lot of the detail gets lost, but I'm okay with it. There are some other paintings that I did where I was aiming to get more detail and then the detail was just lost. And in a couple of the paintings, you can't even tell really what the subject is. Later on, I do a dock leading out into a lake and you just can't really tell what it is. And there's one where I do a wheat field, and I did it sideways on the page like this one is, but when you're looking at it vertically, it almost just looks like an abstract painting. It doesn't look awful, but you definitely can't really tell what it is. So I will practice trying to get better details with watercolor. Now these two botanical paintings I really had a lot of fun with. I kept these colors very muted. I didn't use any colors straight out of the palette. I mixed everything, and I just really love how these came out, especially the one on the left there that I'm painting right now. I really like the depth and the color that I got. I like the muted tones, nothing's too vibrant, and I just like the way it came out. If I can do this technique more often, then I think I would really enjoy using watercolor, because up until this challenge, all the paintings I've done with watercolor, I just haven't been super satisfied with. Some of them have been better than others, and I haven't hated everything I've done, but I haven't gotten anything I'm extremely proud of. But that flower there on the left, I really, really enjoy, and I think I'm going to keep trying to make paintings like that and see how I can grow and learn in that style and see what I can do and find my limits with watercolor. Even after this challenge, I still am very new with watercolor, but doing 24 paintings in one day really got me more familiar with the medium. And I think mostly what it helped me with was just not being intimidated by watercolor. Before, I was just really, really intimidated with it, and like I said, I created a lot of paintings that I just wasn't happy with and fully satisfied with. So I just thought this would be a medium that I would never master, but this definitely took out the fear and just let me be free to experiment and do different techniques and different styles. Here is the galaxy I was trying to make, and it just was a disaster. It's completely awful. You can already see the colors are bleeding together. There's not that great blending effect and that beautiful watercolor signature look that I was going for, and I just kept adding more and more paint because maybe I thought that would fix it, and then I just wiped everything away and doodled on top of it. So these two paintings here are probably my least favorite. I guess they're interesting. The one on the left is kind of interesting with all the faces, but definitely my least favorite. Not what I was going for. It was just trying to make a painting after the disaster that happened at the beginning of the of the painting. So if I try that again, I'll probably try using less water and probably try a different paper, because the wet on wet technique in watercolor is supposed to be a fairly easy technique to use if you just want a galaxy or abstract background. It's supposed to be fairly simple, so the fact that I messed it up so bad is kind of surprising, but I'll definitely try it again. Here is my Bob's Burgers fan art. So if you guys are fans of the show Bob's Burgers, you can recognize both of these items here. The painting on the left is actually a painting of a painting that is hanging inside the restaurant next to the menu. There's a painting of some 3 hamburgers flying in the sky, and they have wings on them. And the painting in the show itself is very abstract. There's not detail at all. So it was perfect for watercolor, and I had a blast doing these 2 images right here. And I think that hamburgers on the left turned out um, way more like the painting in the show than I expected it to. It turned out great, and like I said, it's very simple, but that's the way it is in the show, and I really like how it came out. And of course, Mr. Kuchikopi. I love Mr. Kuchikopi, and I wanted to paint him. I think it's in the first or second episode of the show that he makes his appearance when Bob gets stuck in the crawl space, and he he shows up in some other episodes as well, but I just love him, and every time they put him in the show, it just warms my heart. I love him. So I had a lot of fun painting him, and it was a very simple illustration. Here are two more abstract things that had the least amount of planning, I think, in all of the 24 paintings. The ones of the leaves, I think, turned out alright, kind of a stylistic leaf pattern, and I think this would be cool as a background in some kind of doodle or some kind of wrapping paper or something like that. Although I had no clue where I was going to go with this when I first started painting. I just put paint on the page, and I think it would have turned out a little bit better had I had any idea of where I was going to take this, so that I could have planned a little bit, but I don't hate it. I think it just could have been more refined and a little bit better done if I had some planning. This here is the wheat field I painted, and I like how it turned out, but like I said, if you turn the book vertically, it just doesn't look like a wheat field, although it still looks cool, it just doesn't look like a wheat field. And this is the dock that I had painted. I don't hate how this came out, but it didn't have as much detail as I would like. It's a dock leading out into a lake. There's some rocks closer to the bottom of the page, and then some sand and some water at the top of the page. And it just doesn't read that way, so I think I should have gone in with some harder edges and deeper shadows and stronger highlights to really bring out that detail. I did enjoy, though, mixing the browns for the dock itself and trying to hint towards horizontal boards without drawing out every single board, and I think that part came out pretty cool. And this is my second attempt at the cloud painting, and it actually turned out less, I don't know, less appealing than the first one. So my issue with the first cloud painting was that you couldn't see it quite as well. It wasn't as defined as I wanted it to be, and so I tried on this one to use more white and make it more opaque, but everyone knows that watercolors are not opaque at all, so that was very difficult to do. This one, I don't hate it. It just didn't turn out as defined as I wanted it to be. It's kind of hard to see. But I like both my cloud paintings. I think I'll have to practice clouds though, but I had fun painting those. And these are 2 of my favorite paintings. Again, some fan art of Rick and Morty. I did Tiny Rick and Mr. Meeseeks, and actually a lot of what I learned in these 2 paintings was color matching, because the characters have their own colors. They also have very unique colors and that are kind of hard to mix, like the mint green of Rick's shirt, the kind of blue-gray of his hair, and even his skin. They're all very strange colors. You would think, oh, it's just a bright mint, but it's not, or it's just a gray, but it's not, it's very cool, or his skin is just a peach tone, it's not, he's older, it's very gray. But I think for Tiny Rick, I mixed the colors pretty well, and I'm very, very happy with how Tiny Rick came out. Mr. Meeseeks, on the other hand, you can see me going in with this blue. That blue does not match Mr. Meeseeks. I could not get the blue. I mixed and mixed, and this is the best kind of color I could come up with. And again, I have that issue of the weird texture left because I'm using the back of the paper here, and the orange circle just came out blotchy, and so did his skin, and it really wasn't supposed to come out that way. And I think that's just because of the paper I was using and the fact that I was using the back of the paper. But I had a lot of fun with this, and I hope you guys enjoy. I think I'm going to try to do the same thing with some acrylic paint, so look out for that. But let me know what you guys think, and thank you for watching. See you guys.